Who is the man who stole planes, yachts, and the attention of an entire nation? Some call him a criminal, others a folk hero. But what drove him to live a life on the edge, barefoot? His name is Colton Harris Moore. Born in 1991 in a small town in Washington state, he was a kid who most people would barely notice. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. By his teenage years, he had begun a life of crime that would baffle authorities and captivate the public. Why did this quiet boy become the Barefoot Bandit? Colton's childhood was far from ordinary. In the quiet corners of a small town, his story began, one marked by shadows and uncertainty. While other children played in sunlit yards, Colton wandered streets that felt colder, lonelier. The world around him seemed to whisper secrets, and even at a young age he sensed he was different, set apart by circumstances beyond his control. His parents were reportedly neglectful, his home unstable. The walls that should have offered comfort instead echoed with silence and tension. Meals were missed, promises broken, and the warmth of family replaced by a constant sense of unease. Colton learned early that he couldn't rely on anyone but himself, and the idea of home became more of a memory than a reality. He was often left to fend for himself, learning to survive in ways most kids never would. Nights spent alone in the woods, finding shelter beneath trees or in abandoned sheds, became routine. He taught himself how to build a fire, how to move quietly, how to disappear when trouble came close. Hunger and fear were constant companions, but so was a growing sense of resourcefulness. But did this hardship create a criminal, or simply a masterful escape artist? As he grew older, Colton's encounters with authority became more frequent. Teachers, neighbors, and police officers all saw a troubled boy, but few understood the depth of his struggle. Each brush with the law seemed to push him further into the shadows, sharpening his instincts for survival and evasion. It's here that the first whispers of legend begin, a boy who could slip through the cracks of society, unnoticed, almost invisible. In the darkness, Colton found a strange kind of freedom. He became a ghost in his own town, a figure both pitied and feared, and the line between victim and outlaw began to blur. This is where the myth of Colton Haynes truly takes root. Colton Harris Moore was just 15 years old when he began his journey into infamy. In the quiet, shadowy corners of rural Washington, he started breaking into remote cabins, slipping through the darkness with a quiet confidence that belied his age. He was careful, methodical, and always seemed to know when no one was watching. At first, he took only what he needed: electronics, food, and supplies, items that would help him survive on the run. But as the months passed, his crimes became more frequent, and the stakes grew higher. He stole bikes to get around, choosing small, untraceable items that wouldn't draw much attention. Radios, cameras, even spare change, anything that could be useful or sold. The local community began to notice a pattern: missing items, strange footprints, and the eerie sense that someone was always just out of sight. But Colton was clever, always staying one step ahead of the authorities, blending into the shadows of the rural landscape. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, Colton escalated his crimes to a level no one could have predicted. He didn't just steal another bike or break into another cabin, he stole a small airplane. Not a car, not a boat, a plane. And he did it barefoot, leaving only muddy footprints behind as evidence. The audacity of the act captured the imagination of the public and the frustration of law enforcement. How does a teenager, with no formal flight training, manage to steal a plane and fly it across state lines without being caught? The answer lies in Colton's resourcefulness, his daring, and his relentless desire for freedom. His story was just beginning, and the legend of the Barefoot Bandit was about to take flight. By the late 2000s, Colton Harris Moore became a headline machine. Authorities were baffled. How could one young man evade them for so long? The media called him the Barefoot Bandit, and social media began turning him into something else, a modern-day folk hero. But was he really just a boy seeking freedom, or a criminal mastermind orchestrating chaos on a national scale? He didn't just steal planes, he hijacked yachts from marinas, slipping through borders as if he had a sixth sense. Authorities say he flew without instruments, relying on instinct alone. Every theft left a trail of questions. How did he plan these heists? How did he avoid detection? And the most terrifying part? Colton seemed to thrive on it. Soon, the public obsession began. Fans created fan pages. People admired his audacity, calling him Robin Hood in sneakers, or rather, barefoot. But was this admiration misplaced? Were we glamorizing a dangerous young man, or simply fascinated by a mind we couldn't understand? Colton's escapes read like a movie script. Authorities chased him across states, only to find him gone, vanished without a trace. Some say he slept in the forests, living off what he stole. Others claim he was always one step ahead, exploiting weaknesses in law enforcement that no one else could see. Was it luck, skill, or something more? Psychologists and criminologists have debated what drove Colton. Some say it was neglect and trauma. Others argue it was an innate genius for survival and risk-taking. But one question lingers: how much of this story is fact and how much is legend? In the summer of 2010, after years of evading authorities and living on the edge, Colton Harris Moore's run finally came to an end on the sun-soaked shores of the Bahamas. His capture was the result of an international manhunt that had spanned several countries and captivated the public's imagination. As police closed in, Colton's story, once whispered about in small towns, became headline news around the world. The young fugitive, known as the Barefoot Bandit, was finally in custody, his journey across borders and through countless close calls now over. The arrest marked the end of a wild chapter, but it was only the beginning of a new ordeal. Facing a long list of charges, ranging from theft and burglary to flying stolen planes and boats, Colton was brought before the courts. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Fingerprints, surveillance footage, and a trail of stolen vehicles stretching from the Pacific Northwest to the Caribbean. Prosecutors painted him as a reckless criminal, while his defense argued that he was a troubled youth, shaped by a difficult upbringing and a desperate need to survive. The trial quickly became a media sensation. Reporters from across the country flocked to the courthouse, eager to catch a glimpse of the infamous teen. News vans lined the streets, and every new detail was broadcast to millions. The public was divided. Some saw him as a folk hero, others as a dangerous outlaw. In small towns and big cities alike, people debated his fate. For some, Colton's story was a cautionary tale about the consequences of crime and the limits of youthful rebellion. Parents warned their children not to idolize him, while others saw in his story a reflection of society's failures. Yet for many young people, Colton became a symbol of defiance, a modern-day outlaw who challenged authority and lived by his own rules. Graffiti appeared in his honor, and online forums buzzed with support. To them, he was more than a criminal. He was a rebel who refused to be broken by a system that had let him down. Even as he sat in a prison cell, awaiting his fate, the questions lingered. Investigators pored over his case, trying to understand what drove him to such extremes. Was he a mastermind, or simply a desperate kid making reckless choices? The line between villain and victim blurred. In the end, the world was left to wonder. Was Colton Harris Moore truly a hardened criminal, or just a lost boy searching for freedom in a world that never gave him a chance? Today, the Barefoot Bandit is more than a headline. He's a legend. His story has inspired movies, documentaries, and honestly, countless articles. But why does society love a figure like this? Is it the thrill, the audacity, or maybe the uncomfortable reminder that a single person can evade the system for so long? Some theorists claim Colton had help. Others suggest law enforcement exaggerated his story to sell headlines. And a few wonder if his life of crime was actually a response to secrets we may never uncover. Could there be more to this story, hidden in plain sight? The Barefoot Bandit, was he a hero, a villain, or something in between? Colton Harris Moore's tale is a mirror. It reflects society's fascination with rebellion, with those who live outside the rules. But it's also a cautionary tale about childhood trauma, neglect, and the consequences of unchecked genius. The line between admiration and fear is razor thin. So next time you hear a story of a man who stole planes barefoot, ask yourself, who was he really? A criminal, a folk hero, or something we can't quite understand? Because some legends aren't just written in newspapers. They're lived and whispered in the shadows. If you found yourself questioning everything about the Barefoot Bandit, hit subscribe, because the world is full of stories waiting to be uncovered, and some are stranger than fiction.